This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Caregiver's Dilemma. The Caregiver's Dilemma is dedicated to bringing awareness to the experience of caregivers from all walks of life and to share valuable resources to make the caregiver's journey a little bit easier. Make sure to stay tuned to the end to get information and resources related to today's episode. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Caregiver's Dilemma. I'm your host, Amelia Borland, occupational therapist, owner and founder of Higher Standards Caregiver Training, and now very proud co-founder of WCN University, that's Whole Care Network University, which is an awesome resource site for family caregivers. And today on this episode of The Caregiver's Dilemma, we're going to be talking about another really, really cool, honestly, like mind-blowing resource site for family caregivers, for people who need assistance. This is so cool. It totally blew my mind when I heard about it. And this was also created by my fellow occupational therapist and colleague, Dr. Brandy Archie. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Archie before we get started. So Dr. Brandy Archie received her doctorate in occupational therapy from Creighton University. She's a certified specialist in both living in place and low vision therapy. She enjoys educating, and she offers continuing education classes for healthcare professionals and also guest lectures for OT programs in the Kansas City area. Dr. Archie has over 15 years of experience in home health and elder-focused practice settings, which really is what led her to start Ask Sammy, which is that amazing resource we're going to be talking about. And Ask Sammy is a curated marketplace that helps making aging in place possible, really for anyone, anywhere. All you have to do, I have personally done this, guys. I have tried this. It's amazing. You answer some questions about the problems that the person is having, and then you actually get a personalized cart of adaptive equipment to help. And resources are provided along with that as well. So, Dr. Archie, thank you so much for being here on this episode of The Caregiver's Dilemma.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, this is awesome. Can I just say, before we actually met and talked on LinkedIn, I was following Dr. Archie forever and hearting all of her posts because everything that she does is amazing and she's totally freaking brilliant. But I'm going to stop talking. How did you get to where you are now? How did you come to create this incredible resource?
Yeah, it actually has been a long, evolving journey, right? And so if I start all the way at the beginning, I became an OT because my dad had low vision and I didn't recognize it as a disability because it's just you just get a dad and that's just what it is. And then I went to school and heard about OT separately and then put the two things together. And I was like, oh, all these resources that he's been connecting with and tools he's been using for his vision, somebody actually prescribes that and helps people connect with those things. So really my thought process around gadgets and tools as a way to modify life has started from the very beginning, even before becoming an OT. As I became an OT, that just magnified. And so what I noticed is when I was seeing patients in all the settings, because we have to deal with it at every level, hospital, at home, outpatient, there's this drop off at the healthcare system. And so there's a few things like a wheelchair or a hospital bed that I could say, hey, I think you're going to need this at home. Here, I can help you get this. And we go through the medical process to get it covered by your insurance and you get the right thing. But it kind of stops at the end of that. There's actually only 5 things that insurance covers that kind of comes into your home that might modify it. And so because I think nobody knows this, I'm going to just say all of them.
Please do. Yes, please do.
Because everybody thinks, the thing happened because of a health issue, so the thing I need is going to be covered by my health insurance, and it's not.
Right. No.
So your insurance.
Wah, wah.
Wah, wah. Exactly. So be prepared. So here's the thing. You can get a wheelchair or a walker. You can get a hospital bed. You can get oxygen at home. You can get a lift, like a Hoyer lift, to help get somebody in and out of a bed. And in the very rare occasion, you might still be able to get a bedside commode covered by insurance. That's the end. That's it.
And can I just say, okay, obviously, you and I both know that if payers would actually provide whatever the appropriate equipment was for someone, we would have so fewer hospitalization. It would be absolutely mind-blowing, both in healthcare outcomes, quality of life, and certainly in the financial bottom line of all this. But just specifically on bedside commodes, what the heck, man? They were covered when I started practice only 13 years ago or something like that. Well, and then my mom had a hip replacement last year, and I was like, yeah, and we need a bedside commode. And no, it wasn't covered. I mean, I'll go get a bedside commode, but WTF, man, WTF.
Yes. There's a reason. The reason is the definition of durable medical equipment is something that is specifically for helping somebody through a medical diagnosis, which means that it needs to not be helpful for anybody else. And so if it can be helpful to somebody who doesn't have a specific medical diagnosis, then it is not coverable. So that's why,
that is stupid. Payers, if you are listening, I've never uttered that word I don't even like the word stupid. I don't let my kids say it. But listen, payers, if you're listening to this, that is stupid, because you know what is a medical issue?
Mm-hmm.
Pooping and peeing. And when people cannot void their bowels and void their bladders, then guess what? They go to the hospital. They go with UTIs.
Mm-hmm.
They go with impactions.
Mm-hmm.
So come on, folks. What's up with that?
Exactly. But this is why a grab bar is not covered. This is why a shower chair is not covered, because everybody could benefit from that at one time or another. And it doesn't necessarily need to be because I have a spinal cord injury that I have to have this thing. So for the commode issue, if you have a no bathroom on the first floor and you can't go up the stairs, that is the only occasion in which a bedside commode is coverable now, which is a very small fraction of homes. Most people at least have a half bath on the first floor. So essentially it's not covered, even though they're saying it is.
That is nuts. I mean, Lord forbid we actually prevent people from having serious problems or issues. That would make way too much sense.
Way too much sense. We're not set up to do that at all. Not at all in any situation. So yes, I was having that problem of okay, I know that these other tools can be useful for you after having a stroke or what have you, and it's not coverable by your insurance. I will gladly give you a reference to it, but I can't really do much more from there for you. And so then, depending on where I was working at the time, you never got to see whether that thing worked or they got that thing or teach them how to use that thing once they got it. And it just felt like a very disjointed process. And so I started a local business here in Kansas City called Accessible Living, where we would go to the home, figure out what was needed to stay there, and then prescribe that equipment and sell that adaptive equipment and make sure that they got it and it got set up, close the loop. And that worked well, but Kansas City actually takes up a big space. And so we were having a hard time driving to all the places that we were getting referrals from because of the distance between them. And it just felt inequitable, actually, to only allow people to get the right information if we happen to be able to show up. And so we wanted to democratize that and make it accessible for all. The internet is about accessibility for everybody. We have work to go to get there. I know that there's lots of accessibility issues, particularly with the internet, but the way that it has transformed our society is because you have access to information when you need it. Why shouldn't you have the access to the information you need about how to stay living in your home in a unified place? And so that's why we came up with that, Sammy. And our quiz tool is made so that it's us doing our home assessment with you, but you get to do it on your own time with the same kind of questions. So that's how we ended up here.
And can I just say, when people are going through the questions and Ask Sammy, from the user perspective, it is so simple. It's so simple and it is so easy. But there is an incredible amount of thought that had to go in to one, making it feel easy from the end user perspective, but then also providing the most appropriate recommendations based on that input. Because believe it or not, when occupational therapists are working with you, or, you know, we're out in your house or wherever it is, there's actually there's anywhere between a dozen to 100 things that we're considering before we actually recommend a piece of equipment. So you had to put so much thought into making sure that this thing was going to work as close to your OT brain as it possibly could. That's difficult, people. That's difficult.
You know what? It is. And I also think that that's why I didn't start Ask Sammy first before Accessible Living, because I did feel like at first that I needed to be present, see the thing, filter the information that I was getting, and then out pops a recommendation, right? Because we're not just thinking about, what are all the things that exist in the world and can this work, but also what do you need now? What might you need in the future? Has your disease going to progress? Whatever. And so there's a lot to consider. And so that's why we created it with a mindset of let's not go down the pathway of put in your diagnosis, put in your height and weight, put in all this information. We took it from the problem perspective, because you know what you know is the problem. Caregivers know the problem. Clinicians know what the problem is. The person themselves, they know what things are not capable of doing or having a hard time getting done. So let's start from that aspect and work our way backwards, because there's a lot of overlap. If I have a stroke or I had a hip replacement, and it's still hard to get up from the toilet. The problem is I can't get up from the toilet, right?
Right. Yeah.
So then there's a few ways to solve that problem, and it kind of depends on the toilet that you have. So if we come at it from that aspect, then it makes it easier for everybody to follow along with, and then helps us narrow it down in a way that is effective and accurate.
And of course, that's an occupational therapy perspective too, right? Because by the way, occupational therapists do not require you to have a job to see you. So what we're thinking about is how we help people do the things they want and need to do. Mm-hmm. So everything that we're doing, ultimately, that's where we start from. That's where we end up. That's the end goal. And everything else, there might be a lot of other information that goes into it, but everything else is actually secondary to what is that functional goal? What's the problem? And how are we going to solve this functional problem so that someone can do what they want or need to do? Yeah. So it makes so much sense that you as an occupational therapist, taking that, what we would call a top-down approach, right? To think about how you can build this incredible kind of problem-solving machine that you did.
Problem-solving machine. I think we're going to put that on the front of the website. I like that.
Dude, listen, I'm good at catchphrases. Can I just tell you also, and I know that we're here to talk about you and Ask Sammy, but the parallels in our two stories are so crazy to me. Brandy and I actually haven't talked about this stuff before. I just fangirl on her, basically. So when I first started, practicing in the community in private practice, I was going out and doing home modifications, things like that for people. What I found was that people needed so much caregiver training. I'd walk into a house and, they might have me there so I could look at the bathroom for them, or so I could solve, a specific kind of access issue or problem. But then I'd walk in and I'd see, the Foley collection bag was up in the air, or I'd see XYZ, or they'd say, hey, while you're here, I don't know how to use this. They'd bring out a Hoyer or whatever it was. So I was doing all this caregiver training, and I felt the same things. One, there's not enough of me to go around. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, even if every occupational therapist in the state were to go out and do this, it still wouldn't be enough, because it still wouldn't be enough. There's no possible way we could do it. So one, there's not enough of me to go around to actually make the kind of impact that I want to make. And two, it didn't feel equitable, because not everyone was able to afford me going out there. Not everybody was able to access those services. Not everybody happened to know someone who could send that referral. Exactly. And so and for me, part of why I do what I do is because we have this idea of occupational justice. Yeah. Right?
Yes.
That's so important to me, that everyone, it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter what their background is, it doesn't matter where they come from, everyone deserves to have healthcare access, and they deserve to have the opportunity to live the life that they want to live in the best way possible. And so it was just like, this thing that I thought was going to work as a service model actually is not going to work as the service model that I want to provide. And so it was like, whoop, flip, higher standards caregiver training. Here we go.
Yeah, we had the same thought process and came out with our two businesses separately, but with the same goal in mind, right? Is that we're trying to make sure that people get access to the information and the things that they need in order to choose to live the life that they want instead of being forced to do a thing because that's the only thing they know or the only thing somebody said that they could do. You almost said my catchphrase, which is like, aging in place is a right and not a privilege, and I'm specifically focused on helping seniors with aging in place because there are a lot of other systems in our society that can help. Like, can our tools and stuff that we have on Ask Sammy help people who, like kids or somebody with a developmental disability? Yeah, it can. But there's processes in place to try to help get that information to people and catch the kids in the school system or all the ways. But getting older is a thing we all do. But we don't all necessarily go to the hospital and then start the aging process from exiting the hospital, and which is the only way you interact with OTs for the most part. And so you should get to know that information before a problem happens. Or maybe you had a fall and went to the ER and now you're concerned about your mom, but there was nothing broken, so nothing was initiated. You should still be able to be like, well, what can we do to prevent this in the future? She's a little bit achy. She's having a hard time doing blah, blah, blah. How do we know this? Who's going to tell you that? Hopefully you got some friends maybe, or you read something or you listen to this podcast, but that's all happenstance, and it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the other really cool thing about what you're doing at Ask Sammy and what, I'm trying to do through Higher Standards Caregiver Training and WCN University is there have to be other points where people can access information that is provided by actual subject matter experts and professionals besides having to have something bad happen to them.
Yes.
And then being totally at the mercy of whether or not a doctor writes an order for that particular provider or professional, which means that they're at the mercy of whether or not their doctor knows that person even exists or what they do or how they help, or whether or not their insurance payer is willing to provide that needed service. People just need to have more ways to get information from actual trusted expert resources besides just having one or 2 points of contact in the hospital, 1 or 2 points of contact in home health, which unfortunately, as we know, those points of contact are even getting fewer and fewer and fewer because of the way that our healthcare system is really strapped for personnel and frankly, the way that our payment system works.
Exactly. So I literally talked to somebody yesterday who found out about Ask Sammy and was like, this would have been useful for me because I had an injury. She was not that old, but went to the ER, fixed up her foot, went home, did not get access to any services because she wasn't that old and they didn't think she was going to have a problem, but she lived by herself and now she's in a boot. And she's like, well, how am I going to get in the shower? How am I going to do this thing? How am I going to do that thing? And she had to figure it out on her own. But why? Why do you need to have to figure it out on your own when people have already have answers to this? You just need to be connected to them, So
yeah, I wish I didn't hear that kind of story so much. And I know you feel the same because it is so frustrating to know wait, we got people who actually can help you with this. They can help you with it really fast and you can be on your way and then, go live your life. And it's just frustrating when people don't get connected with those resources. But of course, that's part of why you are doing what you're doing and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
There's some other cool things about Ask Sammy, though, besides just getting equipment recommendations. Would you talk a little bit about some of the virtual home assessment resources that you guys have? Because that's awesome.
Yeah. So in the same vein of getting access to a subject matter expert about a thing without having to go through the healthcare system to get it, we decided that we'd also offer virtual home assessments because while the quiz is very easy to do, I also think it's a certain kind of person who's willing to do it. And sometimes people want to have an interaction personally with somebody to ask their questions to be guided to. Maybe the quiz is not specific enough to your particular needs because you got this weird shaped bathroom or whatever. We're here to help you with that. And so What will happen is if you schedule a virtual home assessment, because we've done this for so long in so many ways, as long as there's somebody there who can hold a phone or a tablet and move around the home so that you can be the camera person, we can peek in on what's going on. There will be an OT on the other end talking to you about what you might need to do. And that could be for home modifications. It could be for considering how to move things around in the house so that things can be more accessible, for putting a hospital bed in. It can be for literally anything, if as long as it's related to being in the home and staying there. Like we want to make sure that we get you the right information and connect you with the right services, which is why it's so important to us to not just be a e-commerce site where you can buy stuff, but also that you can gather the resources, the education, the information that you need. So that same thing would happen in your virtual home assessment. We start with a phone call to get the basics so we can use our time well once we're online. And then we meet together. And the awesome part about it being virtual is that, let's say you're caring for your father who lives in a different city, or maybe you're just at work and can't always be leaving all the time for all these appointments and such. Anybody that you want can be plugged into this. It doesn't have to just be two of us there. And so that way it can be a more collaborative effort with the whole family or the team or whoever is involved in the care for the person that we're talking about.
That is awesome. Everything that you do makes me so happy. It really does. Like, everything you do makes me so happy, because it's like, this is not only what should happen to make it so people can access these resources, it's what has to happen, because there are too many needs compared to the number of individual providers available. So it's just like, we have to think about technology. We have to think about how we are leveraging things, to create positive change in the world in ethical and responsible ways. And I think that you are you're nailing it. You're killing it. You're killing it.
I appreciate the feedback too, because to be frank, I don't think I should have to be in business, really. In my ideal world, this is a part of the healthcare system already. This is a part of how we do care.
Because FYI, people, this is hard. There are easier ways to make money than doing this. Like, all of the other ways. All of the other ways are easier.
They are, but this is just so important. And I understand exactly what you're saying about, just hold occupational justice in very high esteem. And if you see a need that you feel like you can meet, you try to do it, and then hopefully from the bottom up, we'll demonstrate that this is important enough that payers and the government and everybody gets on board with going down this pathway.
I hope that other occupational therapists are watching, listening, kind of seeing what can be done that works in a different way, looks at things in a different way. I hope that healthcare system and payers are paying attention to what's happening here, just to show that there is a better way than, how we've been operating, which is frankly just so unsustainable that we have to explore these options. So I think the same. And I hope that what both you and I are doing is something that becomes natural and just part of the way it is, instead of something that people have to go out and seek and Google and hope that they know someone that knows what's up. I do want to say, though, there are some more resources on Ask Sammy that you and I have worked together, since what we do kind of we're like peanut butter and jelly, sort of. Ask Sammy and Higher Standards Caregiver Training and WCNU are sort of like peanut butter and jelly. So we've worked together to partner up to bring some of these resources together a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So in a similar vein as when I was going out to see people about home modifications and you were seeing all these other problems and giving education, the same thing was happening on our end. And so the tool that you use is only as good as how well you know how to use it. And so the part that we're missing by not going in person to see people is the education piece, and with Accessible Living, what we would do is, sell that product, bring it, install it, and train them on how to use that thing. And so that's one thing that we really can't do very well virtually. And so we have partnered together to match your classes with the products and resources that people might be getting, so that they're not only getting the tool, but they're also getting the knowledge of how to use it. And maybe, like you said, they already have the tool, but don't know how to use it. Now that information is available to them. And because we've plugged it in to the quiz, there are some places where you might go down a pathway of answering questions about the problem someone's having. And there might not be a tool that's offered. And it's actually like a set of resources and an educational course, because we feel that strongly that the education is just actually primarily important and the tool is the helper. And so we're super glad to be able to have all of Higher Caregiver Standards training like pulled in and like integrated in there, because I think it also demonstrates to everyone that like both things are necessary. Like we don't want to be Amazon and just sell you stuff that you ends up in your garage because it's not the right stuff. But also I was getting tired of just going to people's homes one by one and training them on the thing, or saying, hey, if you had this thing, it would be great. It would do this, train them on all this, but they don't actually have the thing. So you need both things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of the cool thing about the way that we've sort of integrated this information together, like you said, is people can get the recommendation for what they need, or maybe just the educational resources that they need. And then the training courses that I provide on those particular topics or pieces of equipment or whatever it is, those are based on like literally thousands of actual interactions that I've had with caregivers over the entire course of my career. So there is a very, very, very high chance that in that training course, in those videos, you are going to get the answers to the questions that you have, because these are the questions that I've answered thousands of times. And that's really, you know, how the courses are set up, is to say, okay, here are the top 3 to 5 things that people, here's the equipment, here's how you use it, here's how you adjust it, here's how you use it correctly, but also here's where people get into trouble, and here's the solution to that problem. Here's the top 3 to 5 questions that people always have, or where they, you know, have a hiccup, and here's how we actually solve those problems. And it makes it so you can actually get real practical, real world, like how does this look in reality versus how does this look in a textbook or on a website. And I think, like you said, pairing those two things together is having the right equipment, but then using that equipment correctly. That is the key to really having success and preventing bad things from happening, having better healthcare outcomes. And, you know, most importantly, I think I speak for both of us here, most importantly, letting people live the lives that they want to live. That is what it is about.
Exactly.
That's it. That's a wrap, guys. That's all.
Well, that's what we need to say about that.
I mean, what else is there to say? Okay, I do have one more question for you.
Sure.
Before we, well, actually, I have two. First, is there anything that people should know about Ask Sammy that we haven't covered here already today?
Yes. I think I was not explicit enough in a couple of our offerings. So first of all, the quiz is free. Going through it and finding it doesn't cost you anything. You get connected to all the right stuff. If you decide to buy something, great. But otherwise, you'll know what you need. Second, the virtual home assessment is $39. And so that means that you could schedule that at almost any time, including when somebody's in the hospital. As long as there's somebody at the home and we can get some basic information on the phone about how the person is doing, then we can plan for a discharge and understand what's going on at home, and then help you get the right stuff you need, because half the time you're getting discharged and you're like, hey, they're going home in 2 days and they're going to need to do this. And you're like, what do I do with that? We are billing for it out of pocket and not billing insurance for OT, particularly because we want you to get your other services to do the thing that you need to do. And we're just here for that expert opinion about how to make home work for you. And then lastly, I think I'll add, in case you have any people who are students, is that we have this super special student user account that gives them access to a bunch of other cool things that are helpful for students to be learning about adaptive equipment in a very organized way. And so if anybody on is an educator and wants to know how to get their class set up and put it as part of their curriculum, that's also free and would love to chat. So all you have to do is reach out.
Dang, I wish I had known about that like 2 weeks ago. I was doing a guest lecture somewhere on like home mods and stuff, and I didn't, but I'll email the regular instructor for that class and share that resource, because I yeah, man, students should get access for that, because we can only ask questions about things if we understand them well enough to know the answers. And, you know, there's just so much to know. It's awesome to give students resources so that they can go out there and do this really important job too.
Yeah, it's really hard for educators to stay up on all the things, because like there's so much. Even just not even educators, just clinicians themselves has had the hard time. Like you said, like if the doctor doesn't even know to refer a thing, then it's not like they're being harmful to you on purpose. They just don't even know about it. So, we love gadgets over here. So we stay up on that and then just use our stuff.
That is awesome. Okay. So I do have one more question for you before we wrap up.
Yes.
That I always ask everyone at the end, because, music will just change your day. What song do you recommend a caregiver who's listening to this right now should go and listen to change their mood or whatever they need for that day?
The answer to that question is an old song. It's by Fred Hammond, and it's called I Will Trust. And this is if you're in a low mood and you just don't feel like you have nowhere to turn or you're feeling overwhelmed. This is a song that I listen to personally in order to feel like I have a little bit more direction and feel like I have some support. And so that's one of my favorites.
I haven't heard that before. I'm going to go listen to it after this because, no matter who we are, no matter what you're doing, sometimes we all just you just have a day where you're like, I don't know what is happening. Where am I going? Am I on the right path?
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds like a good one. So I'm going to go listen to that myself later. You said it was
Fred Hammond. Yes.
Fred Hammond. Ugh, I better not screw that. Fred Hammond, I Will Trust. Dr. Brandy Archie, thank you so much for joining me today on The Caregiver's Dilemma. You are awesome. Thank you for what you are doing for the community, not just of caregivers, but the community at large and helping people live the lives that they want to live and that they need to live. Thank you for what you do and thank you for being here today.
You know what? I appreciate you and thank you for what you are doing, because if we don't tell people about the awesome things that we're providing for them, they don't know how to access it. And we have to do that in so many different ways. And so you're so awesome at being able to provide content online and by podcast and just the things that are already existing. And so it's super useful to be able to have a place to point people to so they can get what they need. And so thank you for the work you are doing.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to The Caregiver's Dilemma. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you can get notifications about when new episodes come out. And I will talk to you and another guest next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Caregiver's Dilemma. If you're a family caregiver, make sure you check out the resources and experts available to you at WCN University. WCN University is a one-stop shop for family caregivers to get reliable information from care experts to support their financial, social, physical, and spiritual well-being. WCN University also offers practical courses from licensed healthcare providers to help you more safely and successfully care for your care partner. To get started, visit WCNUniversity.com. You can take a course, check out our expert lineup, or join our family resource community for access to monthly live discussions, curated discussion boards, popular courses, and get resource recommendations direct from our expert lineup. Because being a family caregiver isn't a one-person job. It takes a village. Join the village today.